Okay, we're going to get started in just a minute here. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the San Diego Green Building Council Equity Summit. This is session number 2, the Climate and Equity at the Forefront of Reimagining San Diego. So San Diego Green Building Council is celebrating its 15 years of sustainability. You can see our mission and vision statements. Hopefully you all were in our first session, and Bridget had spoke a little bit more about the council, but feel free to go to our website at sd-gbc.org. So hopefully you did get a chance to go to the first session. It was great and very informative and inspiring discussion. That was transforming the workplace for a more just future. And now we're at the 11 to 12:15, Climate Inequity at the Forefront of Reimagining San Diego. We'll have a little bit of a lunch break, and then our last session will be thinking beyond green in our built environment. My name's Elizabeth Carmichael. I'm the principal architect at EcoHouse Architecture. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm also on the board of directors with San Diego Green Building Council. And Maleeka, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. I am the co-director of policy at Climate Action Campaign and the chair of the San Diego Green New Deal Alliance. I'll talk a little bit more about the San Diego Green New Deal Alliance, but the San Diego Green New Deal Alliance in a nutshell is a coalition of organizations and community members dedicated to fighting for a zero carbon region in a way that creates more just communities and good jobs.
And Roberto, please introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Roberto Carlos Torres. I'm the climate equity specialist at the City of San Diego, specifically housed in the sustainability department. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And Dan, please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Buenos dias, everyone. My name is Dan. I oversee operations and development at the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition, which is a burgeoning about 20-member group coalition striving for sustainability efforts within communities of concern. And I also oversee development at Grid Alternatives here in San Diego as well. Grid Alternatives is a nonprofit solar installer, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about both later.
Thank you. So happy to have the three of you. So we will start with Maleeka and with the San Diego Green New Deal Alliance. Maleeka, we've all heard of the Green New Deal, but what is specifically the San Diego Green New Deal and the Alliance?
Yeah, good question, Elizabeth, or Liz. Thank you so much for asking. So San Diego Green New Deal Alliance, I just want to start by saying, did anyone else wake up to the bad air quality that I woke up to and the smell of fires? I think it's coming from Orange County. Just another reminder that the climate crisis is here and now, and we really need bold action to address this climate emergency. And that's really what the San Diego Green New Deal Alliance is about. So I'm excited to share a little bit more. Can you skip to the next slide? So starting off with who are we? We are a coalition of 50 organizations, as well as community members. San Diego Green New Deal, or sorry, San Diego Green Building Council is one of our members. I'm very excited to say. And I think how broad-based we are is one of our biggest strengths. So we have everything from environmental organizations, labor unions, social and racial justice organizations, community health organizations, faith-based organizations, small businesses. I'm probably missing something, but to collaborate with others that you don't normally collaborate with, I think is one of the biggest strengths that we have in our coalition. Green Alternatives and San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition are also part of the Alliance, which is really wonderful. So that's who we are. And then our vision, I'll just share this with you. A San Diego region that achieves zero carbon by 2035 through a fair and just transition for workers and communities of concern, the creation of good family sustaining jobs, and the development of affordable, equitable, and inclusive communities powered by 100% clean electricity. So that's a lot, and I'll break it down a little bit more, but that's our vision statement. So origin, a little bit of background. Every year, Climate Action Campaign, we put out a report on how well cities in the region are doing to meet their climate goals. And what we found year after year is that though there are some really great efforts and some really great leadership and some really great commitments, as a region, as a whole, we are not on track to meet our climate goals. And we're also finding that cities across the region are struggling to implement climate goals equitably, especially with the wealthier cities able to implement more climate strategies than some of the more low-income communities. So with that being said, there was some concern. Oh, sorry, we can still stay on that slide. Thank you. There was concern about what can we do about this? And this was also around the time that the United Nations came out with a landmark report stating that if we're to avoid the worst impacts of the climate crisis and to avoid climate catastrophe and the deaths of hundreds of millions of people, we need to cut emissions in half in the next 9 years, get to carbon neutrality by 2045 or sooner globally, and achieve negative emissions thereafter. So we knew that what cities were doing was not enough, that cutting emissions roughly in half, as cities are planning to do, is not our North Star anymore. And we need to be planning to get off fossil fuels entirely. So our coalition, our group of organizations and community members are dedicated to the zero carbon goal, but doing it in a way that creates more prosperous and just communities, ensures a just transition for workers that may be affected or will be affected by this transition. And we believe we can't afford to wait for Washington. There's talk about a Green New Deal at the federal level, talk about another really bold climate plan, but we need to be doing everything we can at every level to meaningfully fight the climate crisis and to do so in a way that's just. And so we hope that we can be a model for other regions, the state, maybe even the nation of how we chart this path to a clean energy future. So next slide. So we have a vision statement on our website that you're all welcome to go to if you're interested in learning more, but I'll try to break down some of our goals. So sometimes we bucket the Green New Deal in terms of climate, jobs, and justice, but they're all really interconnected and inextricably linked. So climate goals, goal to get to 100% clean electricity. The city of San Diego has been really leading on this front, and so we're really excited. They established a community choice energy program that will help get us there. And we're fighting for some other policies as well to make this possible. We're dedicated to affordable, inclusive communities that are bikeable, walkable, transit friendly. We need to build world-class transit to address our largest source of emissions, which is transportation. We are dedicated to fighting for a robust urban forest, so basically shade trees across the city and the region. The city of San Diego has a really ambitious goal of 35%, which we think is great, 35% urban tree canopy across the city, and we want to see that across the region. And then we're also dedicated to restoring, preserving habitats, and then also learning from, elevating indigenous, especially Kumeyaay knowledge of taking care of our natural environment. So next slide. So equity goals, like I said, these are all inextricably linked, but we want to fight for meaningful participation and leadership from communities of concern. We're dedicated to that. We're dedicated to achieving clean air and water, healthcare, housing for everyone, resources to ensure that everyone not just survives, but thrives. And next slide. And then our jobs goal, we are fighting for good union jobs in the green economy. We're also fighting for a just transition for workers who will be impacted by this transition to a clean energy economy. And we're looking to solutions out there. For example, in Seattle, they passed a tax on big businesses that will help fund their Seattle Green New Deal. And a huge chunk of the funds, I think they raised 22 million for their Seattle Green New Deal. A huge chunk will go towards workers who will lose their jobs in the transition to clean energy. And then we're dedicated to workforce development in communities of concern. Next slide. Thanks. So about a year ago, we held a community planning process to identify obstacles, strategies, next steps forward. And what we came up with were 3 areas of focus. So building awareness and support about the urgency of the climate crisis, the solutions are out there, and really building the political will or the community will to make the political will possible. Which leads into our second one, which is transforming political power, getting people in power who are real climate champions for a San Diego Green New Deal, and then making sure they implement the policy change necessary to achieve these goals. Next slide. So policy opportunities, what does a San Diego Green New Deal look like in practice? Like the New Deal, the original New Deal, it will not be one comprehensive policy that will make this all possible. It's going to need to be a series of mutually complementary policies. So first, we're looking to some really big plans out there that are necessary to achieving our vision. So looking to the regional transportation plan to make sure that we build out world-class transit that really helps connect everyone to economic opportunity and meet our climate goals. We're looking to the City of San Diego Climate Action Plan as the first plan in the region that can demonstrate how we achieve a zero carbon future in a way that really centers equity. And so it's been really great to participate in that community feedback process that the City of San Diego and Roberto has been working on. We're looking to the County of San Diego Climate Action Plan as another big opportunity for a zero carbon climate action plan. And then another idea that we've been exploring is the idea of a regional climate authority, realizing that even with all these other plans, there's still going to be gaps in achieving our vision. So a regional climate authority could, among several things, ideally address some of the equity issues around implementing climate solutions equitably, could help with a just transition, could ideally have taxing authority to raise funds for the huge infrastructure projects we're going to need to build and huge investment in green jobs. So we're still exploring that a little bit more, looking at other models, and we'll hopefully have more to share with everyone soon. Next slide. And then another component is where we know that communities already have a lot of solutions and know what their communities need best. And so we're about elevating and unifying behind community-driven solutions. A few examples, youth opportunity passes. This campaign has been led by Mid-City CAN and City Heights. Fighting for no-cost transit passes for youth will not only help connect youth to opportunity, but also build or grow a new generation of transit riders. A couple other examples that our Alliance has supported. We've supported police oversight, the Community-Led Commission on Police Practices, and we fought for environmental justice staff at the County of San Diego and the Air Pollution Control District. Next slide. And then we know research is also a component. How do we achieve a zero carbon region? What would that look like? I don't think anyone really knows everything we'd have to do to achieve that. What kind of jobs will be created, impacted? And there are a lot of other questions that we would like to research and explore. Next slide. So that's it in a nutshell. Really encourage those of you watching, if you want to be a part of San Diego Green New Deal Alliance, to reach out, to also follow us on social media. If you're an organization, you can join the coalition. We also have 3 working groups where community members can get involved. So thank you. I hope I stayed within my time. I tried to go quickly, but.
Thanks, Maleeka. I'm sorry, I didn't announce at the beginning. If anyone has questions, so please put them in the chat box and we will answer them with each speaker and also at the end. So feel free to add questions there. So thank you so much, Maleeka. There's definitely a lot of work to be done. What do you think are the biggest obstacles in achieving the goals of the San Diego Green New Deal?
Yeah, so I think the political will is not entirely there to take the bold action we need to take. And there's polling out there that shows most residents, most constituents, they want to see bold action on climate. But I think, unfortunately, it gets drowned out by a lot of the interests of the fossil fuel companies. And so we need to build a really powerful, very vocal, people-powered movement to really hold electeds accountable, to make sure that we get elected officials who really want to be champions for these bold, we could say bold, but they're just necessary policies that need to be passed. Not just around climate, but around equity and around jobs. And so that's kind of why we have this 3-pronged approach to our effort. We need to build the awareness and support, build the people power. Then we need to transform political power, get people in office that really will fight for these things. And then we need to pass the policies. But obviously those don't happen in that order. We need to be doing all 3 all at once. So that's my answer. Good question.
So are there any policies or a policy on the books right now that the Alliance is supporting that you need support from the community for?
Yeah, so we have a couple. One of them, we currently are opposing the mayor's current franchise agreement. It gets a little bit wonky, but if anyone wants to reach out and learn more, basically, we don't think the current franchise agreement is the best opportunity for us to achieve our vision. So if you want to learn more about that, you can reach out. But maybe a less wonky one is we really want to encourage the city of San Diego to achieve or commit to a zero carbon climate action plan that can be a kind of a San Diego Green New Deal climate action plan. So there are forums that are happening right now and a survey that's out. And so we urge you to let them know that you really want to see a carbon neutral plan.
Great. All right, so everyone get on it. Is there any other ways that people can get active, or should they just volunteer to be a part of the Alliance?
Yeah, so if you go on our website, greennewdealsd.org, and there's a Get Active tab, there are the 3 working groups you can get involved with. We're also, if you're interested in volunteering for one of the member organizations, we can also pair you with that as well and support one of those organizations. But the working groups are really great. They're doing a lot of really wonderful things. And so I encourage someone or anyone who's interested to sign up for one of those.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for letting us all know about the Alliance and what's, activating in San Diego right now. So with that, we're going to turn to Roberto Torres with City of San Diego. Roberto, can you please explain what is this Climate Equity Index and the goals of the newly formed Office of Race and Equity?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And really happy to be part of the conversation and kind of share where San Diego has been a leader regionally and also in the nation when it comes to understanding climate equity. So I think if we go to the next slide, I have kind of an overview. Yeah, so back in December 2015, that's when the city first adopted our climate action plan. And it was already kind of a first of its kind in the region. One of the many things that it had the foresight of doing was understanding that social equity and environmental justice are key components and necessary to be addressed when looking at cutting our GHG emissions or having any kind of action, climate action work. So really, when in 2015, when this was adopted, there was already that statement that we needed to safeguard our most vulnerable and ensure that they receive kind of the benefits and are prioritized in our climate action planning. We now understand social equity and environmental justice together to be climate equity. But quite honestly, the equity, racial equity, social equity, environmental justice, all of these things are kind of the root, they have a root cause in the system that has led us to be where we are today, right? So a lot of the work that we're doing here in the sustainability department is understanding what are the systems in place that have kind of led to the outcomes that we see now, or the disparities that we see, right? So the Climate Equity Index is really meant as a tool to understand what the disparities are across the city by doing a citywide climate equity assessment. And then from there, be able to develop metrics and benchmarks on how we can improve and ensure we're adjusting the system so that we no longer are perpetuating historical inequities that we see. So if you move to the next slide, we worked really in partnership with over 30 community-based organizations that do a lot of work in what you hear called communities of concern. Really, communities of concern is just the term that we use here in San Diego to describe what the state calls disadvantaged communities. But the feedback has been from our community residents that term disadvantaged communities just doesn't really reflect what's happening on the ground or the pride that our residents feel, right? So changing the terminology to communities of concern is so important to be able to really identify and acknowledge that there are communities of concern that we need to prioritize in any real process we're trying to do. So the Climate Equity Index ended up splitting census tracts into 5 different categories, from very low access to opportunity to very high access to opportunity. And the map that you see here on the screen showcases kind of the blue, the dark blue, where we're seeing the most barriers to a high quality of life in these census tracts, right? And what we were able to understand from this is that really the areas in blue are communities of concern and areas that we need to really be prioritizing when looking at anything from GHG reducing measures to really any other policy work of investing in capital improvement projects or anything like that, right? So the map here again shows you kind of the breakout of each category in each census tract. And what you'll notice is that a majority of our communities south of the 8 are the ones that you see in blue, be that dark blue or light blue, right? Next slide, please. So diving a little deeper into the findings, what we were able to find is that actually a majority of our population that reside in 152 of the census tracts have high and very high access to opportunity, right? But we are noticing that 125 census tracts have low, very low to moderate access to opportunity. And you kind of see this pie chart just distribute what that looks like on the ground. So if you go to the next slide, as we dive deeper into what's happening here, we also discovered that a disproportionate percent of people of color are concentrated in census tracts that have very low to moderate access to opportunity. So we're seeing this disproportionate concentration in areas that face the greatest disparities. So what all this is showcasing is kind of the symptoms of the system that has been historically in place that has led to these disparities, right? And so now it is incumbent on the city and myself, as well as really anyone, to start really looking at what are causing these disparities and how can we start addressing those historical inequities, right? So using the Climate Equity Index, we're able to understand what areas are facing the greatest disparities. We're able to look at the 35, soon to be 38 indicators that have kind of shown what is happening kind of on the ground, and then be able to understand what is occurring and how we can address the inequities. So if you go to the next slide. So the Climate Equity Index report had 5 recommendations of them. The first one being to seek grant funding to support community engagement and invest in the areas with low to moderate access to opportunity. I'm going to stay with this one for a little bit because I think community engagement is the key to really ensuring equitable outcomes in the future. Data sources like the Climate Equity Index or Quality of Life Index, there are so many data tools that you can utilize to see what is happening and who is facing disparities. You can simply look at low-income communities and understand that they have certain barriers that other communities won't have, right? But to really understand what's happening in these communities, to understand how we're going to tackle the systemic oppression that's been occurring, you can't do that without these communities being at the table, right? So really the most important thing in addressing equity in any form, be that with the city, be that outside in organizations, is ensuring that we're actually talking to the people who are affected by this, shifting the power dynamic so that they are at the table and able to make these decisions. So recommendation 1 is the key to really ensuring equitable outcomes throughout the region. But that does take funding, right? Funding that unfortunately with the pandemic has just plummeted. And so seeking out grant opportunities is really the way to ensure we can keep this going. Following in line with engagement is looking to conduct public engagement efforts in partnership with community-based organizations, leveraging their expertise and their connection to these communities to really be able to have that in-depth connection. A lot of times our communities of concern have a distrust in government. And why wouldn't they? They have seen these disparities happen time and time again. They're not going to just come to the city and say, okay, now you say you get it, so we're going to believe you. There's a distrust, and community-based organizations are kind of our bridge to be able to showcase that we are trying to correct the issues of the past. And they also hold us accountable, right? If I go to a CBO, if I go to Dan and say, hey, in Southeastern, we're going to do this, and then 6 months later we don't do it, she's going to come to me and say, what the heck, right? That is the type of environment that we need to be in, right? Where the city not only says all these great things and understands what's needed, but that we're also held accountable for what needs to be done. So in line with community engagement, the third recommendation is to kind of explore the feasibility of a sustainability ambassadors program. And actually, in partnership with the Urban Sustainability Coalition, there is a climate ambassador program, which is essentially a pilot that's working in Southeastern San Diego. We want to be able to expand that to all our communities of concern and really have that tie-in with community residents who are able to then let their neighbors know about the efforts that the city is having around climate action and sustainable planning, and really empower our neighborhoods to be more engaged and more involved, and let the city know what's needed in their communities, right? Again, oftentimes their voices are lacking at the table, especially when we're looking at citywide processes. They can be left behind because they have so many barriers to face. So a program like the Climate Ambassadors Program in Southeastern that's a bit more widespread is one that can really change that power dynamic, and one that we are currently exploring kind of how we can do that and establish that in the city. The other is to look at our internal processes and determine what mechanisms we can utilize to incorporate equity in all city projects. And that leads to the council adopting in the FY21 budget the creation of the Office of Race and Equity, right? That is a big step for the city. A lot is yet to be determined. The ordinance for creating that department just got voted on and passed. So it'll be a lot still coming in terms of hiring their director and other staff members and whatnot. So we'll probably see more information about that office into the next calendar year. But definitely it's a big step for the city to just establish that office and really lead the way in how we're addressing equity in the city. So I think with that, I think this is my last slide here. So I'm happy to answer any questions or just thank you for your time.
Thanks, Roberto. Appreciate all the information. We do have a question from the audience. Roberto, what are the 3 additional indicators you mentioned that are not currently in the index? That would that include air pollution, a disparity with the highest impact in communities of concern?
Yeah, our stakeholder working group met very recently to discuss the addition of air quality indicators, particularly PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5, and ozone and diesel particulate matter indicators into our climate equity index.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that question, Colleen. And a question from Erica. On the CEI map, significant areas are in white. What does that signify?
I believe if it's in white, it is not within the city of San Diego's territory. So it should be the rest of the county. And there's like a pocket of the county like within the city that is in white. But everything else should have a a color from dark blue to dark green.
Thank you. So it seems like there has been a real shift to community engagement, and this is sometimes tough. What has been the most successful method that you've found to get the communities involved?
Definitely partnering with community-based organizations that are already serving in our communities of concern is the key. You know, leveraging their trust and expertise in the community has been the most successful. And you know, all of this is kind of relatively new. It's been around, of course, but it's not something that cities and jurisdictions have actually really focused on. We're actually employing this method ourselves in the update to the climate action plan. You know, in probably early next year, we'll be partnering with CBOs to get a lot of feedback from our communities of concern, specifically to the update for the climate action plan. So there's a lot of public engagement work that's been done so far, and more that will continue, that will have a very specific focus in our communities of concern. So working with the CBOs and having a specific strategy to talk to communities of concern, I think, are the two keys to success for increasing engagement.
Great. And what would you say has been the most significant policy to come out of the findings and recommendations from the Quality Equity Index?
That's a great question. And, you know, I think there hasn't been necessarily a policy that I could point to and say this came out directly from the Climate Equity Index. But what I can say is that there are a few policies kind of in the pipeline, if you will, that are utilizing the Climate Equity Index to start prioritizing communities of concern. And the CEI really provided us kind of that space to have this conversation. So I think there will be policies that are being developed right now that will come out that will specifically talk about communities of concern. But I think that the best thing about the Climate Equity Index was that it provided the space to have that conversation, to allow us to acknowledge that there is a need to prioritize communities of concern. And you're seeing that in the Complete Communities initiative that's moving forward. And we're going to be seeing it a lot more into the future. The other thing about the Climate Equity Index is how we did engagement for even developing this tool. For the first time that I can recall, the city has done a process, a decision-making process that's really been community-driven with our community-based organizations. The city facilitated the conversation, but really until we were able to reach consensus with our stakeholders, decisions weren't being made essentially by the city. They were made by our stakeholders. That's something that no other policy in the city, I don't believe, has ever gone through this. So those two things, I think, are real successful highlights.
Great. Thank you so much for the information. Where can we get further information on it, or to keep track of updates concerning the Climate Equity Index?
Definitely, thank you for that. So you can go to the city's website, sandiego.gov/climate equity. There you'll be able to find information specific about our climate equity work. And then also with the public forums that are coming out and future ones for our climate action plan update, if you just go to sandiego.gov/sustainability, you'll be able to find all the information on all the work that we're doing there.
Great. Thanks so much, Roberto. Really appreciate your time here today. So next, we are very excited to hear from Dan Mueller with San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition and Grid Alternatives. So Dan, please let us know, how is your organization working to address issues at the intersection of climate and equity?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation. Roberto did a really wonderful job of alluding to community-based organizations who help make that community input possible. So thank you so much for setting me up really well to talk about the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition and all that we do. So the coalition was really created to address systemic inequity after it became increasingly clear across various channels that Southeast San Diego's communities specifically lack not only representation in important discussions of sustainability, like the conversations Roberto is alluding to, but also opportunities to enter the green job economy. So today we exist to bring together communities of concern, stakeholders, and like-minded organizations through grassroots organizing to inform processes and policy and to improve the quality of life and increase opportunities for residents in Southeast San Diego and also other resilient communities. I can't stress enough how important languaging really is in the conversation about facilitating equity, because we have to reshape our systems to be more inclusive. When we're talking about communities of concern, it's positive and at the same time acknowledges the resilience of the communities that we're talking about. So typically, the California Public Utilities Commission would refer to these communities as disadvantaged. You might find them on a low income, low access census tract. For grant purposes, typically we see the term underserved. How can we expect community members to show up to the table ready and willing if we're only framing the deficit of their neighborhoods rather than their desires to make positive change? So I think we start with how we refer to community and really participate in a mutual meaning making process to figure out what ways of communicating get the folks that we want to hear from to the table and let them feel empowered to lead and be a part of decision making. So can never stress enough how important languaging is. So the coalition, what is it that we do? We build coalition. We're nearly a 20-member organization, and we also have community members from Southeast San Diego and community members at large that all participate in monthly meetings with organizations and stakeholders. And we discuss basically all things sustainability. So policy, upcoming events, educational opportunities, and most of all, we get the chance to address concerns brought forth by the community. Just this past weekend, we had a community member bring up there is raw sewage flooding in her community. And we were able to actually mobilize and already have a meeting with some mayoral candidates to get the situation under control and addressed immediately. So we coalesce. We empower community, and I'll talk a little bit more about what Roberto was alluding to with the sustainability ambassadors. Is we have a program called Climate Ambassadors for Environmental Justice, which is a certification for community members in the basics of environmental literacy, as well as community organizing. So really, we're encouraging community members to identify issues affecting their communities and then support them through project development and management and generating solutions to those problems. We were really excited to train. We have about 24 certified climate ambassadors as of today. And we just completed our think tank series, which is really a focused brainstorming session where we meet with our climate ambassadors. Our partner organizations come in and give presentations on potential opportunities for climate ambassadors to get on board with. But we also give our ambassadors a chance to submit project proposals to potentially be adopted by the coalition. So this is, we're basically deploying our climate ambassadors back into their communities, helping them fine tune their observation skills to figure out what exactly is happening, and then supporting them through a process that allows them to develop their ideas into action items that the coalition can then put all of our manpower behind. So that's been a really exciting opportunity. And all of that is paid. We give our climate ambassadors stipends for getting their certification. We give them another stipend for completing the think tank series and for submitting proposals. And we're able to do this through something that we are super excited about called our Community Sustainability Fund. The idea is that we should be honoring, if we're going to honor the ideas of our community members, we need to be willing to honor their time as well. Voices, why are voices of color excluded? Why is volunteerism expected as an entryway into the realm of sustainability and having a job, a green job? So this fund actually provides scholarships to our climate ambassadors to fill roles with other organizations that otherwise would have been volunteer. And we also give them an opportunity to apply for a micro grant from the coalition to kick off some of the projects that they've identified as of interest in their communities. So that is a little bit about the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition. And being that this is a Green Building Council forum or summit, I'll talk a little bit about grid alternatives as well. So I'm definitely privileged to wear many different hats as a community organizer, renewable energy revolutionary by day, and food and medicine sovereignty advocate by night. So the other hat I wear in my day work is with Grid Alternatives, which is the nation's largest nonprofit solar installer. And I personally believe that with that recognition comes the responsibility to acknowledge that clean energy access has a problem. Communities of concern are disproportionately impacted by pollution and climate change. Communities of concern are really hit first and worst by the impacts of climate change. Families within these communities spend 4 times more of their income on energy, and they're being, quite frankly, underserved by the growing solar industry. Grid Alternatives operates on the belief that addressing clean energy access is also addressing climate change and economic inequality at the same time. To put it just really frankly, solar reduces energy cost burdens on families and affordable housing owners. It puts people to work, and it accelerates a clean energy transition that really is for everyone. So what does Grid do? Direct solar project development and technical assistance. There's a workforce development component to what we do. And we also have a team at headquarters that is championing low-income solar policy leadership. Here in San Diego, we have Energy for All, which is no to low cost solar installation for homeowners within communities of concern. Something that I've been really excited about is our solar for nonprofits. So we actually are able to create collaborations to install solar for nonprofit organizations, and that money that they save on operations gets to go back into helping make their mission move, which is super exciting because we get to broaden our impact tenfold with projects like those. And then job training is really essential in that opportunity for economic empowerment. Each installation really is a classroom on the roof. We offer paid solar installer job training whenever we can and support our job trainees with resume building and interviewing skills as much as we can. One thing that I love about Grid is that Grid understands that climate justice must be anti-racist. As much as we are a literal construction company and we go out and construct for people, we also have to be willing to disrupt oppressive systems. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about a renewable energy revolution. So I tried to move quickly because I wasn't sure on time, but I hope that kind of outlines how both the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition and Grid operate at the intersection of climate and equity. The Climate Action Campaign is a partner of San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition, so is the City of San Diego. And Grid is also a member of the San Diego Sustainability Coalition. So I kind of I have my 2 hats on at the same time most of the time. So yeah.
Wow, thanks, Dan. That's really amazing to see, the work in action. I love it. If we know somebody who might be perfect for the Climate Ambassadors Program, is there a way to get them involved?
Yes, absolutely. So SDUSC.org, San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition.org is the best place to get information. We actually have a training coming up. November 7th will be an orientation where folks who are interested can come and learn a little bit more about the program. So definitely get in touch with myself or check out our website so that we can get them into that November training and November orientation and maybe set them up to be a part of training.
Awesome. And it sounds like there's some new climate ambassadors, but are there any projects in the works that they've proposed so far?
Yes, so we are really excited to support, potentially support. We actually just we just finished reviewing our proposals last weekend at the Think Tank series, but we have one of our climate ambassadors who has been delivering food to families in need. And we're trying to basically expand her operations. So she herself is a grower, a backyard grower, and knows other backyard growers, has been collecting food and delivering it amongst the community. And so we want to help her sort of operationalize that and be able to serve more families. We have a climate ambassador who is looking to distribute sustainability kits, so energy efficient light bulbs, reusable utensils and straws, little kits to families in Southeast San Diego. So might be supporting that. And then the community member who is having the issue with the sewage in her community, we've been able to get some immediate response, but we also want to support her in her community and organizing to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So we are working with her to figure out what sorts of grassroots organizing mechanisms we can deploy within her immediate neighborhood, so that they can all be aware and vocal and set the precedent for what they expect as community members.
That's incredible. So we're obviously this community, we love metrics. So we love to be able to prove that with a scientific method that the improvements that we're doing are making a measurable difference. What do you think would be the most important metric to measure to ensure equity is included in our sustainability efforts and in our organizations in general?
Yeah, so I think Roberto said it best when he said that community engagement really is key. And so I like to think of this, can we answer the following questions, really, if we're looking for metrics? Are communities encouraged to participate? Are community members educated on all issues affecting their lives and their livelihoods? And last but certainly not least, and probably most measurable, are diverse voices and perspectives employed in generating solutions? I don't think we have to be willing to compensate people for their ideas and their time. And so it looks like, creating these different offices that center racial and social equity as a cornerstone of the work and not simply a byproduct of what it is folks are already doing.
Thank you. Is there ways people watching the session can be proactive in civic engagement or to get involved with the coalition?
Yeah, so you can always become a member of the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition. It's open to organizations as well as community members. And actually, if you join before year's end, you'll actually get to see how we run things before we launch our formal paid membership structure at the beginning of next year. You can donate to the Community Sustainability Fund to ensure that communities of concern, that those voices are being heard and being valued. But I think, being proactive looks like not waiting until you've already created a plan or an action to consult the community. We need to get to know the people who make up the communities that we work in and get their feedback before we make decisions about things that will ultimately impact them. And so we have to be willing to slow down. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable and ask questions. And we have to be willing to make mistakes. And so those are kind of my suggestions around community engagement and how we can continue to empower communities to be part of the solutions to the problems that they're facing.
Thank you so much. Well, we really appreciate everyone's time, and we have time for some questions and answers. If anyone has any questions to put into the chat, I'll give it a minute. Otherwise, I have one final question for everyone. Okay, well, I'll go on with my final question. So I love how the video, A Message from the Future with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gives hope to what a future can look like if we all work together to make these transformative policies a reality. So could each panel member give us a snapshot of a future that San Diego reimagined with the policies addressing climate and equity successfully in place? What's the snapshot that you envision? And Maleeka, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is the San Diego Green New Deal vision, but I'll just go with my vision. I imagine that all communities, including coastal communities, are really diverse. They're people of every skin color mixed together. I imagine a lot of people in the streets playing, feeling safe, walking, biking. I imagine people, imagine 100% clean energy or solar panels on every roof. I imagine people hopping into a really fast train and being able to get to Ramona or El Cajon. I imagine lots of parks. And maybe that's just the beginning of a vision, but I imagine a very positive future. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Roberto, how about your snapshot of a reimagined San Diego?
Definitely. I think it adds on to what Maleeka was saying, you know, in that a more equitable city, one where our most vulnerable are given the resources that they need so that they can thrive in life, right? Where a community can hop on a train and go wherever they need to go, and not have to worry about that trip taking 2 hours or longer, right? An area where everyone has access to healthy food, right? That there's either a grocery store nearby or that we've implemented urban agriculture in a way that community gardens are thriving, you know, and that we have communities that are healthier, more invested in, so that everyone has a nice sidewalk with a good working street light, access to active transportation so they don't have to rely on a vehicle. I think all those things are possible. I think all those things are, you know, something with cleaner air. It will take us all working together to do that. And so ultimately, I think the vision of a future San Diego is one where our most vulnerable are at the decision-making table and really guiding the priorities for the city.
Thank you, Roberto. Great vision. And Dan, how about your snapshot of a equitable and sustainable future for San Diego?
Yeah, well, I think Maleeka and Roberto said it well. I think the vision for the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition is one where health and happiness are the baseline, that we have empowered individuals, innovative enterprises, and vibrant communities. The idea that we can move beyond sustainability and into a truly regenerative way of life that also gives back to Mother Earth, and that our communities of concern are operating with autonomy and dignity. I think renewable energy should be the standard, and that food and medicine sovereignty can be, you know, the powerhouse for a strong local economy that thrives by honoring diverse people and perspectives.
Awesome. Wow, thank you. I almost have a little tear in my eye from that. Thanks, Dan. Okay, I hope all of our dream futures we make a reality by doing what we're doing and putting these policies in place and making our voices heard to the policymakers that this is the future that we want to see. So thank you to all the panelists. And Bridget, I'll turn it back over to you. We're done a little early.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. I was excited to pull this panel together just because, you know, who you're right here, and they'll agree with me. This is really just a sample of the great community organizers, local government officials, people that are putting work into it. It's their dedication and passion. I love San Diego. I'm a local San Diegan. I am like constantly blown away by how much love our community members have for our city, and that's come across in the forms of multiple different organizations. Like we as San Diego Green Building Council, like we are just scratching the surface on what organizations are out there on the ground doing the work. And so I was really excited to get a little bit of representation from local government, community organizers, nonprofits. There are multiple different avenues for our community members to get involved in climate equity work. And, you know, it's something that very much intersects with the built environment, and it's very much ingrained in the work that we as green building professionals do. And so it's important that we have these conversations and continue these relationships. So we were just really excited to get this group together. And so I just want to thank the three of you again. And then Liz, thank you again for helping run today's discussion. I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you, Bridget.
Yeah. And then I just want to let everyone know that this was the second session of today's Equity Summit. So we have one more panel. It's going to be starting at 1 p.m. So we have about an hour lunch break now. We'll give you a little bit more time to grab some food, take a break. And then our 1 p.m. session will be Thinking Beyond Green in Our Built Environment, which will have representatives from the International Living Future Institute, eco districts, and the International Well Building Standard to talk about that intersection between equity and the built environment, and even the community scale building and development as well. So it's definitely going to be a great conversation. And all of these sessions will be recorded and available on our website, accessible to you after the fact. So if you'd like to share this information with colleagues, friends, you want to go back and look at the presentations and see how you can get involved, we'll make sure that that's all accessible to you after the fact. So I just want to say thank you again for the attendees for joining and for my panelists. And then I just hope everyone has a good afternoon and a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. Thanks, everyone.